Hello and welcome to the Miracles and Grace podcast. I'm your host, Grace Mayernick Hackett, and today we obviously have a really special guest. When I had Davey on the podcast, I said, we have my favorite guest of all time on the podcast today, and he said, that's not true, your mom's not been on it yet.
That's so sweet.
But today we have my mom, Suzanne Mayernick, joining us. Thanks for coming, Mom.
Thanks for having me.
This is so fun. I don't even know where to begin. I feel like a lot of people know a lot about you. Most people probably affiliate you with being a mom to 8 kids and founding Love One International. And, man, you just wear so many hats. But do you just want to introduce yourself? Anything else you want people to know?
Well, I'm married to Mike. We've been married 31 years this year.
Yeah.
And, I feel like those are my claims to fame. Being married to Mike, having 8 kids, and Love One.
Yeah, that's fair. I thought it would be cool. We were just talking about Love One. In case you don't know, we have a rehabilitation center in Uganda for critically ill, specifically malnourished kids. And it's like a house of miracles. It is kids who come in and you would look at them and say, there's no way that baby's going to survive. They come in at 1 pound, 2 pounds, 3 pounds, and they're so tiny. And couple that with the fact that Uganda is a less developed country and they don't have the medical care that we have. And but time after time, these babies get the care that they need at our center, and they go home healthy to their families who are so grateful and excited, and who came in hopeless, thinking there's no way my baby's going to make it. And then they receive these babies that are so healthy and happy. And it's like witnessing miracles on a daily basis of these transformations. And so I thought it would be cool if you just shared kind of the story, and we can piggyback off each other, but of how Love One started, because I feel like even just in the way that it started, there's so many little miracles and ways that like the giant web came together to be what it is now. So I think we should start back. I'll say this first because I don't know if you would think to say this, but I think this is so cool. A lot of people ask, how did y'all end up in Uganda? And probably a lot of people who listen to this will have read the book Kisses from Katie. And Katie Davis, now Majors, is a long-time friend of ours. And for over a decade, I think, my dad was the chairman of her board for her nonprofit, Amazama Ministries. And so when I was in 7th grade, I was 12, I literally turned 13. I spent my 13th birthday in Uganda. We went to Uganda, a small group of us, just to go visit Amazama and everything she was doing. And I was thinking about this because I've thought about the way that Love One has unfolded. And do you remember, I'm sure you do, on the first trip, we got to the airport, it was spring break, and our flight got canceled. And there were, I don't know, maybe 10 of us going. And we were all so sad because we'd never been to the continent of Africa before. We'd been doing all this stuff to support Katie and Amazama and fundraising for her, and we were so excited to go see it in person. And our flight got canceled, and we were like, well, we're not going to be able to go because it's 24 hours of travel. And by the time we get there, it just wouldn't have made sense. And literally the exact number of people we had, that exact number of seats randomly opened up on this flight. And maybe we would have, I'm sure at some point we would have gotten there, but I want you to tell the story of meeting Josie Love, because I just look back at the timing of that and I'm like, what if we hadn't gone and met Josie on that trip? Like, the trajectory of Love One could have been completely altered had we not gone on that first trip in the timing that we did. What if we hadn't met Josie? What if we had gone at a later time? So anyways, I want to start by that. We started our first trip to Uganda with 10 seats opening up on this flight after ours was canceled. And then you take over.
It's funny because when you were talking about what you were going to name your podcast, and then when you asked me to come on, I started thinking about miracles that I feel like I've experienced through my life. And each one kind of aligned itself with something to do with timing, you know? And so in my head, I was kind of like, okay, how are miracles attached to timing? How is timing attached to luck? And so I just Googled, like, what's the definition of luck and what's the definition of miracle?
Mm-hmm.
And a miracle it's a surprising event that's not explicable by nature or science, and it's considered to be divine. And then luck is a chance considered as a force that causes good or bad things to happen. And so that is an example. In our minds, it was the timing of one plane tickets or seats closing down and another one opening up just by luck or chance. Or you could say, for us, that was a miracle.
Yeah.
Same thing. You can say that with all of our adoptions. For me, our adoptions started before Love 1, Josie Love being one of those.
Which, just so if you don't know our family, we have 4 kids, 4 biological kids in our family, and 4 adopted kids.
Yes, and
2 domestic, 1 from Honduras, and 1 from Uganda.
But the timing of it all, it was just miracle after miracle after miracle with each one of our children, even with things with our biological children, but specifically our adoption journeys. And yes, like that flight opening up, us going to be able to spend time with Katie, meeting, her name was Josephine at the time, she was in a children's home there, and meeting her, and she was sick, but we didn't know how sick she was. Yeah. Fast forward a year later, everything kind of turned into a tumble, and through a lot of prayer, the Lord continued to open doors. Once again, you could say there were miracles, or you could just say it was luck, but for us, I feel like they were just divine interventions where God just stepped in and made a way in order to get her home.
Yeah.
To get her healthy.
And I feel like someone who hears the story of the perfect number of seats opening up on a plane might be like, that's luck. But then when you look at everything that trip led to that wouldn't have happened otherwise if it had not been in that timing, I don't think you can deny that it was miraculous. Like,
that's right. That's right.
Yeah. So we went over and we met Josie, and you mentioned that she was sick. I didn't really appreciate this until I became a parent, but she was 3 years old and she weighed 12 pounds, which I think my boys weighed 12 pounds at like 3 months old. And I remember holding them, or weighing them at their appointments. And when they hit 12 pounds, it was such a significant moment for me because it triggered that in my brain. And I was like, this is how small Josie was at 3 years old. Like, so mind-blowing. And you can speak to this part of your story, but like, I know that, long story short, we met Josie. She was in a children's home. Katie was like, this little girl has no family, no living relatives. Her future is an orphanage. And if I could choose, she had a really special bond with her because Katie had worked at this children's home when she first moved to Uganda. And she said if I could choose any child in the whole country of Uganda to be adopted, it would be Josie Love, or Josephine. And it was weird also because my mom was saying, she was like, our family, I think you started saying our family was complete at 6 kids.
Yes, I did.
So at that point we had 4 biological kids. We had adopted my 2 brothers, and she was like, we're done. We're full. But she always would add this caveat of, we're full, but if we were ever to adopt again, I would want to adopt a little girl. I love the name Josie Love. I've always wondered, like, she always said, I would love to be able to do her hair in pom-poms. And I look back and I'm like, was it because you were like, African American hair just takes a lot of care to keep it healthy and moisturized and everything. And you were slaving over Joshua and Caleb's hair, and you didn't get to do anything with it.
Yeah, I don't know. I just always in my heart or in my head, it was a little girl named Josie Love, and she had like big Mickey Mouse ears, pom-poms. And the crazy thing, we went to this orphanage, and every little girl there, for hygiene purposes, they shaved their heads. But Josephine's hair was long, and they braided it. And they said it was because it was so thick and pretty, they couldn't bear to cut it. And so we looked at this little girl. Her name was Josephine. She had hair. Literally, I think when we were there, we even took her braids out and put pom-poms in her hair. I think we did too. And it was just once again, in a divine moment of the Lord hearing the desires of your heart in the little things.
Yeah.
I think we didn't realize Grace really felt the Lord telling her. She was very clear. We got home and told Mike and I, Josie is supposed to be a Mayernick. She put her photo on all of our computer screens. She hung her photo on our refrigerator with a magnet. And we had a lot of conversations about praying for Josie Love a family versus us being her family. And I think just in time, as we continue to pray and just the Lord prompting you to speak pretty boldly to your dad and I, we found ourselves changing up our home study to international and on a plane to go over there and bring her home.
Yeah. Something that has been cool for me as an adult, looking back on that story, is like she has some, when they ended up feeling peace to go bring her home, they found out at a routine medical exam when they were in Uganda that she not only was just sick and malnourished, she had malaria, tuberculosis, she's HIV positive, and I do not remember saying this, but y'all have always told me that I looked at you and said, would you take her if she was perfect? And I just look back on that whole story of meeting her, how much I loved her when I met her, how, like, convicted I felt that she was supposed to be in our family, and then how bold I was about it. And I look back and I'm like, I don't remember doing so much of that because I was 13, but I feel like as I've gotten older, it's made me appreciate, like, I feel like God used me even though I was a kid, and just the power of the Lord being able to use kids as, like, vessels to do his will, you know what I mean? And I see now, as we have friends who are raising kids who are close to how old I was, like, little things that the Holy Spirit will speak to Willa Gray or whoever, that it's like God spoke to her to speak to the parents, you know? And I look back and seeing it now, I'm like, that's so crazy that God did that through me, because I don't remember, you know, I remember it, but I don't remember saying that to y'all, but that was such a big moment for you guys being like, wow, well, yeah.
Well, because in that scenario, we already had 6 children, and to bring hope in another one, we wanted to control it, right? We asked if we could have someone take her to Kenya to get an assessment to really figure out what's going on so we could prepare medically stateside. We asked if, you know, we had like a list of things that were our check-off to-do list to make sure that it would be safe for us to bring her home.
Yeah. And
when all of those things failed, I think Mike and I both felt at a loss of control. And when you said that, well, I mean, if she was complete, because I was literally going through logistically, if we bring her home and she can't walk, she's 3 years old, you know, explaining the details, and that's when you asked me that, and I was like, and it was an aha moment, and it kind of, what I felt the Lord say to me is, do you not trust me? Like, if I bring this little girl into your home, I'm going to take care of all the details.
Yeah.
And it was beautiful just to watch, truly, that happen. We brought her home, and she miraculously, within 9 months, she started walking around our house, calling everyone by name, and medically she was, you know, undetectable with her HIV, and of course the malaria and tuberculosis was gone. But
I think also it's worth noting that we also didn't know that much about HIV at the time. Like, I remember once we brought her home, we had someone come in and do, like, for our whole extended family, because at that point we obviously really understood HIV.
And friends and babysitters, or...
Yeah, it was like everyone we knew came in our living room, and we did. I remember that so vividly. And we had her come in and teach everybody about HIV, because there's so much misinformation just that it spread through spit or urine or, like, all these ways that it's not spread. But there were just so many things we didn't know, and so we brought in this woman to educate everybody in our lives, because especially once her HIV was detectable, and it has been since, like, she can't spread it. It's not, if you took a sample of her blood, you will not find traces of HIV in it, because she stayed on the medication that she stayed on. So think that's also just worth noting, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that probably also hear HIV and are like, oh my gosh, but it's so different than what the stigma is around it.
It's very manageable.
Yes.
Yeah, very manageable.
Yeah. So anyways, so we brought her home.
Yeah, and she became healthy and just became a little, we call her sunshine. She smiles from the moment she gets up until she goes to bed, and she has been such a place of joy and peace in our family that we would have missed.
Yeah.
We would have missed it.
Yeah. And we were just talking about this the other day, but even when she was in elementary school, her teachers would have made an elementary school wide rule that no one was allowed to talk to her because they couldn't make it from the classroom to the bathroom without 15 people stopping to talk to specifically Josie Love. and that just sums her up. She's always been that way. Everybody knows her. Everybody loves her. She's just like joy in a person.
Yeah, I think that year 7 of you guys were at school. You were a senior. All the way down to Caleb being in the first grade. Kindergarten, and she was in the first grade.
Yep.
And so you can imagine all of y'all's friends, truly they couldn't get from the classroom to the gym for PE without all the hugs and kisses. And
yeah.
It's good. It's good.
Yeah.
For the heart.
And now she just graduated high school. She's going to Lipscomb University in the fall. They have a really cool program called the Ideal Program that she's really excited to be a part of. So... her whole life, she always refers to herself as a miracle story because, which I guess this is a good segue into talking about Love One.
Yeah.
But I always think about you saying that when you were over there holding her in when we were pursuing the adoption, you were sitting in Uganda in these hospitals holding her, thinking she's not going to make it. Like she's going to die in my arms because she was so sick and so small. So will you just tell what that was like, and then how that ended up basically planting the seed of Love One?
Yeah. I think if you ever hold a dying child, you don't forget what that feels like. And when I was there with her, holding her, and the different doctors I would talk to and the things they would tell me that they were going to do to try to help her become healthy, I was fearful. Mike had to leave and come back to the States to put an addendum under her home study for the tuberculosis. And so I was there with Katie. But I think I just, I would sit in these foreign spaces and look around and see other moms that were sitting there holding their babies. And they had the same look in their eye of just no hope and very fearful. And I can just remember thinking, if I can ever get her home and get her healthy, then maybe one day I can come back over and help these other moms. And we did. We brought her home, and it was just like one thing after another. You just took her from one specialist to the next, and she just became healthy within a year. And fast forward a few years, when I finally got home with her, I was like, I don't know that I'm ever going back to Uganda. And then after, that wore off a little bit.
Because the adoption process is so hard.
It's
There's
just
so
rigorous, and it's just
roadblocks.
Being there with a sick baby and worried that we weren't going to get her home. It was just hard, and a lot of heartache and worry. And then I had 6 other kids at home. It was just hard and sad. But once we got her here and everything became clear, I would literally lay in bed at night and think about those other faces of the moms that I remembered from the hospitals and walking down the streets with their babies. And I just thought, okay, Lord, very clearly you continue to lay this on my heart and put these images in my head so I can sit here in Brentwood, Tennessee and live our life like everybody else, or I can at least try to do something to help. And I didn't have any idea what that looked like. I will say, when the time came, you were graduating from college. And I probably would have never done it if I didn't feel like when you were coming out, you could walk alongside me and help me with just a lot of the logistical pieces of it.
I felt that I also didn't, my degree couldn't really get you a job if you didn't get a master's.
Yes, but your brain works that way.
Yeah, for sure.
And so we just kind of joined hearts and hands, and we're kind of like, okay, we're going to do this. And
I feel like, let me do a caveat, because I feel like people have followed along and probably followed through the 147 million orphans phase. Because Josie Love came home in 2008, around then, because I think, yeah. So if she came home in 2008, from 2008 to 2018, we did a lot of different international projects, like helping fund building a medical clinic in Haiti, or a community of homes and a school in Honduras, or just different projects through a nonprofit, 147 Million Orphans. And then in 2018 is when you really, and we also were working with a children's home in Uganda. And then in 2018, you felt like God was calling you to really dig roots specifically in Uganda under the name Love One, and help specifically malnourished babies. And I graduated in August of 2018, and that's when I got married. So it was just a seamless transition, and I was a child and family studies major, which was amazing. But I was like, yeah, I mean, I've been exposed to nonprofits my whole life, being a part of 147, and it was quite the adventure. Yeah. So sorry, I wanted to give that caveat, because that was a big window of time that we were still doing stuff internationally. But
yeah, I think traveling as a family, serving in other countries, is probably one of the best things we've ever done for our family and our children. Early on, Mike and I realized that where we live is not the norm. And so we started out even just visiting to Guatemala. And then we ended up just serving in different capacities all around the world. And it's changed our life. I feel like it's changed the lens that each one of y'all look through.
Yep.
And Josie and Tuta both came home through them, those spaces of us being in other countries serving.
Yeah, and now as a parent, it's a non-negotiable to me. I think something important is, if you're going to travel internationally, finding places where you can actually be helpful and it's worth it for you to go, like you're filling a need. But a benefit and a byproduct to that is that your kids grow up having a grasp on the reality of the world, and not just life in America, which there is poverty in America. I feel like we get the question all the time of, why are you helping kids in Uganda and not in America? And number one, you have also helped kids in America. We have both my adopted brothers are adopted from the States, but people need to do both. People need to help in America, and people need to help internationally. But I want my kids to grow up, to want to live a purposeful life, and to see the world outside of just their day-to-day reality that is like the 1%, how 1% of the world lives, And I also just think when people ask why our family is so close, there's a number of things. We could probably do a whole podcast on parenting advice and how to raise kids that are close. And I'm sure people will say that they want to hear that. Now
that's
that
probably my number one DM is, how do you raise children that are so close?
Yeah.
I would have to do it.
We'd have to do a deep
dive on it.
But I do think that's an element of it. It's just I think all of us have just a good grasp on reality and what's important in life, because we grew up with an understanding of what the world is like outside of our day to day. So anyways,
I'll tell you another thing. And this is something that through my life, I don't think I've ever even realized it until now. I'm reading the book Captivating by Stacey Eldridge for the second time. And I read it when it first came out, and it spoke to me in that season of my life. I think it was 12 or 15 years ago. And now I'm reading it again. And one of the questions that it kind of asks in the book is, what is something that's kind of held you in a spinning space? And as I was reading it, I thought, okay, let me just kind of look back on my life. What is something that I felt like has held me there? Clearly it hasn't drowned me in that area. Right. But maybe it's made a difference in my life. And I started thinking back not too long ago, a couple of weeks ago, for some reason we were looking for photographs. And our old photo books, there's a lot of photos of me in elementary school, and I'm playing basketball, softball pictures, basketball pictures, cheerleading. I'm playing soccer. Just in elementary school, all I did was play club sports. And to the point, I think one of the pictures got sent to the family group text, and we were kind of all laughing at me in the softball picture or something. And then, so that was all of elementary school. I also did the same thing in middle school. And I loved it. Loved playing sports. Loved being part of a team. Well, then when I transitioned from middle school into high school, you had to make a certain GPA in order to be able to play a sport. We've laughed about this through the years because Mike is definitely the academic of the family and I'm more the feeler. And I really haven't put a whole lot of thought into it until just here. Actually, you asking me to be on this podcast and talking about miracles and then reading this book, those two coupled together kind of led me to this headspace that I haven't entered into in a really long time. But when I got into high school, I went to a public high school, and testing was always hard for me. And the way they would do the classrooms back in the day is the smart people would sit in the front that made good grades, and the ones that didn't make good grades kind of sat in the back. And it was also paper test. So, you would take the test and they would pass it out, and pretty much every time.
Do they not do that anymore? Is everything online?
Everything's online. Everything's
That's
online.
Crazy.
Every time I would get a test back, there would be a big red F at the top. Every time I took a test. I may have passed a or two tests in high school, but they would pass that paper out and it would have a big red F at the top. But I learned if I could do well on my quizzes, which I didn't have to retain as much knowledge, and if I could do my homework and I got to know the teachers to where they knew that I was trying, that I could pass the classes. But because of that, I never could play a sport in high school because I never made the grades. So I never fit into a group. I didn't have a group of friends. I had girlfriends, but didn't have a group that I was with all the time. I think because of that, I found myself reaching out and spending time with everyone. Kind of became a lover of people rather than a lover of a sport or, a subject or whatever. And so I would find myself in the bathrooms in between classes, sitting talking to the girls who were smoking in between the class breaks. I found myself talking to and sitting with people in the lunchroom that I might not ordinarily sit with. I loved people of different color, like whether it be Latin people or, African American people, or I was always drawn to just everybody and everything, and I wanted to know their stories. Fast forward, so in high school, because I failed all the time, and it was, I saw it, you failed. I kind of just made my way by having relationships. Then I graduated, I was going to graduate from high school, and I took the ACT, and I made a 12.
I did not know that.
A 12. And I didn't take it again, because I didn't want to make lower on it.
Yeah.
Somehow I got into college. I don't know how, but I got into college, and but it was kind of the same thing. Test took me down. I wanted to pledge a sorority. I pledged it the first semester. I couldn't make the grades. So then I got put on academic probation, and I did it the second semester, but I couldn't make the grades, so I just quit the sorority altogether. But I found myself, once again, not really belonging in a group of people. No, I was able to look back in high school, and I think because I had so many friends, I was like homecoming queen, and I was Miss Columbia Central High School, and I had all the things that you're supposed to have, but I didn't. But I learned that it was okay to fail, because I failed all the time. Same thing in college. I was worried I wouldn't get through college. I did also learn that I loved art, and if I did hands-on visual learning and not trying to do memory learning, I could survive. So when I got into college, I was in graphic design, did okay through it. Same thing though, the tests were hard. Went into art education, ended up doing pretty well in it because I had a teacher that was more focused on teaching me rather than testing me. And graduated from college. Mike and I got married. But then I took the teacher certification test to be able to teach and failed the test. So once again, I failed again. So I'm telling you all this to say, if we're going to talk about love one, I think if you had not been graduating right at that moment, I don't know that I would have felt strong enough to feel like that I could do it. But because you were, and I think what I learned through the years is I could make my way, but I would also need to surround myself with people that had skill sets and gift sets that were different than mine.
Yeah.
And I could be relational with anybody. But when it came to other skills that I didn't have, people alongside me helped me with that. But one of the biggest miracles ever with Love One was when I sat at the grand opening of our new building. I literally sat there and thought, like, I've come over here to make sure that babies are getting the care they need and the medical care and food that they need to eat. I've loved on moms that had no hope and that were sad. But never in a million years did I ever dream that God could use little old me who failed over and over and over again to where I couldn't even play sports, couldn't even be in a sorority. Every test I ever took, I failed it. Yet I looked around at this compound that was the most beautiful, amazing compound that can save thousands of babies' lives on a daily basis. Just because I said, yeah, I'll give it a whirl. I had the right people to do it alongside me. And I really, really longed to help other people that were nothing like me, that looked nothing like me, but had the same heart of a mother. And that's been one of the biggest miracles of my life through Love One.
Yeah. That's so good. And so much of that resonates with me. It's weird as you're saying it. Like, I look back on things, like, I think about high school, and I feel like I played everything growing up. And then I got to high school, but I wasn't ever like, oh my gosh, you are so good at basketball. Or I was just like, I wasn't bad, but I wasn't the best. Mm-hmm. And Michael was so good at basketball. Annabelle was so fast. Millerian was so they got really into sports. Mm-hmm. Annabelle kind of ended up not doing basketball, but I didn't really have something like that. I did sports growing up, and then in high school I would do the swim team because it was a new sport that we had, and it didn't matter if I sucked. I literally won most improved my first year because I'd never swim in my life. And because it was with friends, like my closest friends did it with me, but it wasn't like there wasn't a pressure to perform on the swim team. You know what I mean? But I look back and as you were talking about yourself in high school, I see so much of myself because I feel the same way. I was friends with so many different people. If you don't know much about Williamson County, it is predominantly white. And, my very closest friend, and I also went to a small Christian school where it was, 99% white, and none of my closest friends were white. Uh-huh. It was, the few people, the small pockets of diversity at our school is where I gravitated, and some of that maybe is because our family was diverse. I don't know, but I also see, as you were talking, I'm like, that's me, too.
Uh-huh.
Those are the people that I gravitated towards, and I was also thinking with this podcast, something that I wanted to make sure I recognized at some point on this is you have always had the spirit of, I'm just going to say yes and walk through the next door that the Lord opens. And if it impacts one person, if we can save one baby through Love One, you have always said, if we save one baby, it's worth it. That's a baby's life, and that's a mom who thought they were going to lose their baby that didn't. If we save 10, even better. But, like, you've just been so faithful in the little and you didn't go into it thinking, we're going to build this huge compound that's going to hold 300 kids at a time and save tens of thousands of babies' lives. And I think because I've watched you model that, number one, I loved seeing parallels because of the ways that I think that we're similar in a lot of that. But also with this podcast, I'm like, I've always said, number one, there might be one person that listens to this and takes something away. And maybe that's all God's plan is for it. Like, and if it is, it's worth it. I will genuinely be at peace if this doesn't reach the masses and affect tens of thousands of people. If it just impacts one and somebody knows Jesus because of it, then I'm glad that I did it. And also when you were talking about people coming alongside you and needing people, I feel like you just saw that with Davey. Davey comes in here and sets up everything for me. It's like this podcast physically would not be happening without my husband. And he is the one who came alongside me and was like, let's do this. I'm going to get you the equipment for Christmas and do all the things for you. And I love everything that you said, and it's been so cool to watch that unfold. But as you were talking, there are so many things in myself that it's at one point were an insecurity that I'm like the only Mayernick that's not super into athletics. And I can't hang my hat on being the best basketball player or the best volleyball player. Those are things that I wish that I could have been growing up. But you saying that to me, I'm like, whoa, that is my story too. I was so relational because that's where I invested all my time was with all these people. And I think recently we had a conversation with one of my best, or you did, I think. Did he say this? Did Braxton say this to you? One of my best friends from high school. I would say a lot of my closest friends came from single parent households, and the single parent that raised them was amazing. But like my dad was a father figure to a lot of my guy friends. And recently, didn't he tell you this?
He told a friend of ours.
One of my friends from high school basically just said, like, specifically you, but our family was such a big part of his testimony. And it's just so cool to look back and see how God used those things at the time. I didn't have those things to put my identity in, but it's like God used that. And to hear one of my high school friends as a 30-year-old say the impact that it had on him just makes you be like, I thought I knew what was best. I wanted to have something to hang my hat on, but that's the thing that matters. It doesn't matter if you were good at basketball in high school. What you take to heaven with you is that. Like him saying, y'all were a big part of my testimony.
I think when you fail over and over again, you're not afraid to fail.
Yeah.
Right? And so the funny thing with each one of y'all, you are exactly right. When you were going through high school, I thought to myself, oh my goodness, it was pretty parallel to what my life was like in high school. Same thing. I would bring so many different types of friends home to my mom and dad. And they encouraged that in me, which was so great. And
I want to do that for my kids,
yeah,
too.
It's so, because it's real easy as a parent to go, wait a second, we need to protect, control, secure all the things, make sure our children aren't being exposed to X, Y, and Z, right?
Especially because my friends were getting into trouble.
Right.
I didn't really get into a lot of trouble in high school, but a lot of the friends I had did. And you're right, it would have been easy for y'all to be like, they misbehave.
Right, you cannot be their friend because they're going to get you in trouble. What's interesting is each one of y'all, even the ones that were really athletic and played a particular sport, there was an area in their space, in their life, where they struggled in school or they struggled in another area.
Yeah. And
so my goal has always been to be right there to support. It's okay to fail. Just try again.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't love that or you don't feel like it's what you're supposed to do, look at all these other things there are to do. But I think everybody gets hyper-focused on this one thing. Not everybody, but a lot of people. And you have to focus on that one thing and stay focused, and you have to excel. And, then play in the NFL or the NBA or whatever it is, which is such a small percentage that ever gets there.
Yeah.
But, kids are talking about that in the first and second grade. And if there's anything that I look back on y'all growing up, I do feel like where you struggled, I tried to just kind of struggle with you or sit alongside you in it.
Yeah.
So you didn't feel alone in it.
Yeah.
Because every child is going to struggle in some way. And I think I look back on my mom and dad, and I never felt shame or guilt or anything for my failing grades.
Yeah.
My mom would say, you can do it. You can, anything you set your mind to do, you can do. And I would think to myself, that is not true because I keep failing these tests. But she just was always she just sat in it with me. And that's kind of been my prayer for each one of y'all. If I was not a perfect mom, I'm sure you could have a list as long as your, arm of things that I did wrong. But I would always hope and pray that you would say that in your struggles, you didn't feel alone in them. Because that was kind of my number one thing, to try to be present. And y'all were all so different.
Yeah.
Had different struggles and different strengths. And so I felt like I was always kind of changing lanes depending on what child I was sitting with in the moment. But overall, I've watched miracles happen through each one of y'all in different ways by the way you've loved different people, or your successes, or actually your failures have been a lot of miracles.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah. I, number one, want to affirm that you did such a great job of that. And I never felt guilt or shame, even when I made the stupidest decisions. I never felt guilt or shame. It was always hopeful and like, that's okay, that's not you. You didn't condone anything, and there were consequences. But it was I never felt guilt or shame from you. And one of my favorite pieces of advice that you've given me throughout my life is that you're never stuck. Like, I think so many people get into, for me, like, I was in nursing and hated it. But I'm like, I'm 2 years into nursing school and I'm just going to switch. And you've always just had such a good high level view of life where it's like, you're not stuck. It's just a college major. You could switch it 3 more times. And that's okay. Like, and I think I'm sure there are people who will listen to this who are in something in their life, whether it's a relationship that they feel like, I just invested 5 years in my boyfriend and I'm just going to leave and I'm 29 and, but you're never stuck. And I think
you have choices.
Yes. You
always have choices.
You always said you always have choices. And I go back to that so much. Because there's so many things that feel like when you commit to it, you're committing to it forever. And outside of marriage, there's really not.
That's right. You always have choices.
Yeah. Even with this house that we're building, I'm like, I hope it's our forever home. I hope that we are there till I die. I love that land. I love everything about it. It's felt so divine. But I'm like, if we get into something that's not where we're supposed to be, we're not stuck. We're not stuck there. You're not stuck in school. You're not stuck in a relationship. Like, you always have choices. It's just such a good, free way to live your life versus putting so much pressure on it. And then looking back and being like, why did I feel so stuck in that?
Yeah. And if you fail, you just pick yourself up and start again.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Ain't no thing.
That's right. I mean,
I would love to hear your favorite miracle story in the Bible.
Okay. I love the woman at the well. And I know it's not necessarily like some big miracle, but once again, it kind of goes back to the timing of it all, that, she would go to the water well alone when there were going to be a lot of people there. Jesus, who is a rabbi Jew, who is not really supposed to be talking to women, much less a Samaritan woman, meets her at the well in the middle of the day. And there's so many layers to that story. Number one, he reveals that he's aware of her past, but there's no condemnation. None. He explains to her that she's there to get physical water, but he's the true living water. And then she leaves being his number one evangelist, just going through her conversion. She led more Samaritans to Christ by her experience with him. And there's another layer to it is, my dad was a Baptist preacher. I grew up in a church, and I feel like there's so much in the Christian faith. There's so much traditions and rules around the church and all the things that you're supposed to do to be a Christian. And in reality, that story just shows her conversation with him and the relationship that she felt that he was offering her, her experience with him is what led her to go tell about him. Not that, she is a Samaritan or whatever it is that she's learned at church or in the synagogue or in the tabernacle or temple or whatever, And so I think for me, what I take from that story is, there's so many things that I just mentioned, but another thing is that I think because I've not ever been a Bible scholar, and I can hardly remember what verse I read yesterday, or even where to find it in the Bible, without going to the front to figure out where the books of the Bible are, if I'm being really honest.
Totally. Every time I quote scripture on this podcast, I'm like, I can't tell you the reference, but
I mean, it's somewhere in that book. I think it's my experience with God in the miracles of the timing that He has brought things throughout my life that's made me believe even more and make me want to take even further steps out in faith.
Yeah.
It's not what I know to be true in my head.
Yeah.
It's what's in my heart, how I feel Him, and then my experiences where He has always been right there every moment.
Yeah.
Of those steps that you take in faith, and it makes you want it more.
Yeah.
You start longing for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my favorite. I love the woman at the well.
I love that you chose that and I love what you said about, a lot of people would say that's just lucky timing that they saw each other, but it's like, no, it was intentional and it was miraculous, and it led to, I feel like a ripple effect of a miracle is that miracles have ripple effects.
Uh-huh.
Like that had a ripple effect and more people came to know Jesus because of it.
Mm-hmm.
That is so good.
Thank you. I love when we're watching The Chosen, and that's, even looking back, that's one of the first, that's the first time that Jesus makes Himself known.
Yeah.
To outward people other than the disciples. And I just find it so interesting that it's her.
Yeah.
Who's had so many husbands, is living with someone she's not married to. He's like, hey, let me tell you about the living water. Yeah. I mean,
well, and
so
that's
beautiful.
Just who Jesus is. That's the perfect picture of...
He has no boundaries.
Yeah, and that's the person He seeks out. Is the one that seems the least deserving.
Right.
On paper, or by the world's standards. Man, I love that. It's so good.
Thank you. You mentioned that Love One... Wait, we can list tens of hundreds of thousands of miracles with just the babies that have come through there that were to the point of death. But once they received the medical care and food and just love that they needed and deserved, we watched them, be able to go back home and healthy and live an amazing life alongside their families. One thing that I think is just a gift for us is because we're not there on a daily basis. Without fail, when we go to visit, there's always one child that is a truly crazy miraculous story that in the 10 days, 7 days, there's been times where we've only been there for 5 days, we get to experience just a little bit of their miracle.
Yeah.
It's almost like He says, hey guys, there are miracles upon miracles on a daily basis, but while you're here, let me give you this extra little miracle, blessing.
Yeah.
This
is the last time I went to Uganda, and we were there for
5 days, maybe.
But 2 of those were travel. So we were on the ground for 3 days.
Uh-huh.
And this would have been at the beginning of my pregnancy with Bear. I was very, very early pregnant. I was so sick that whole trip.
Uh-huh.
And this little baby, as we were leaving, they had just found this baby named Blessing. Do you remember how much she weighed? I
think it was 6 pounds, 4 pounds.
She
was 15 months old.
Yeah.
She was skin and bones.
Yeah, and we were able on the way to the airport just to lay hands on her and pray over her. And then now her pictures are on the Love One site on our Instagram. That's one of my favorite before and afters because you saw, and I remember seeing her and thinking, it will take a miracle for this baby to live.
Yeah.
It was so, so intense and severe, especially knowing her age. That's another thing with loved one. I think you see a lot of pictures and you're like, that baby looks small. Like, looks skinny, but sometimes you don't understand that the baby looks like a normal-sized 1.5-year-old and they're 5, you know?
Right. Well, and when I went in February, same thing. It was the day before we were leaving, and a little baby was found in the weeds or in the bush, and she weighed 1.5 pounds. And the police called the loved one doctors. They went and picked her up at the police station, and they took her to the NICU at the hospital. 1.5 pounds, this little girl stayed in the NICU for 2 days, and then she landed. They brought her to the loved one center, and she was so tiny she couldn't suck from a bottle. They started feeding her with a medicine dropper.
Yeah.
And she's gone from 1.5 pounds to like 5 pounds now.
Yeah.
With no ventilators. Like it's just a miracle. That little girl is eating and thriving and just.
And a testament to our, not that NICU workers and everybody here is very attentive and careful too, but for that transformation to happen with the limited
amount of medical care.
Yeah, is such a testament to our staff. We've spent a lot of time the last few days just talking about how unbelievable our staff is. And each one of them are just like handpicked by God, it feels like.
And just the Lord's hand on these precious little children that land into our laps, and our care is just such a gift.
Yeah, we always say it is by none of our doing. You can't take credit for, when you look at what loved one is, it's like what you said, who are we? Like, we didn't do this. It was just God. We've joked over the years that it's felt like we're assembling a plane as it's in the air, because it was like, she's always said, if God opens a door, we'll walk through it. If the door's shut, we'll just stay. And it's like, every door just flying open, and we're like, oh, okay, we're going to do this next thing, but we don't know what we're doing. And he always makes a way, and it's grown to what it is, and it's saved so many lives and continues to on a daily basis. And getting to do it together is the best. People ask all the time what it's like. Actually, I feel like most of the time it doesn't come as a question. Most of the time people say, I could never work with my mom. And it's more of a statement, and it's the total opposite for us. It's just the best, most life-giving thing to get to do.
Such a gift. Which
is why I'm still doing it when I have 2 under 2 and I'm pregnant. And we still get to work together.
That's right. And let's just throw in a podcast.
That's right. That's right. But I'm really happy that you came on this, and this was so fun and awesome.
Thank you.
So thank you.
You're welcome.
I love you.
I love you.